that happens. And towers fall. And Melkor's like, suckers, there's no light again. I'm back to being awesome because it's darkness. And he bounces. Alright, so we left off a long time ago. It's been a while. Talking about the Ainur just getting down to Earth.
I have to make a map again.
Oh.
A map to the rings.
You have a pen?
I do now.
Una bolígrafo?
See, here's the problem with Lord of the Rings, though. Is that if I'm the sounding board, I would actually like to have an occasion to Google something so that I'm useful. I never have an occasion to Google anything.
Why?
Because I've never needed to Google anything for you.
I mean, you can just like make beautiful notes on your iPad there instead of using a pen and an envelope. You can draw on. All right. So, the Ainur come down to Earth, right?
Who are the Ainur again?
The Ainur are both the Valar and the Maya.
Valar, Maya. I'm putting Maya. I don't know if that's how you spell it.
You spelled it wrong last time, but we'll see.
Last time I put M-A-Y-A.
Yeah.
I. M-I-Y-A?
M-A-I-A. Is that right? Now I don't know. You're making me question.
It's like Maria, but without the R.
Alright, anyway. So, Maya and Valar, right? They come down. They're on Earth. Ta-da!
Wait, it's flat.
It is flat. It is a disc / dome, right? Because you kind of think of it as like a dome.
Yeah, okay. Well, this is not going to turn out as pretty as I wanted it to, but... Okay, it's a disc / dome.
Yeah.
There's mountains.
So, they get down and there's nothing there. Right? Very first, they come down and they're like, what? This isn't what I signed on for.
Yeah. And down. Drawing down.
The Ainur get down. There's nothing there.
Okay.
They realize that that's their job. Right? And...
To make it beautiful.
Right, so they get down there and basically what happens...
Wait, when they first get down there, is it literally just a flat disc with nothing on it because all the people that are like elements and whatever have to add everything?
Yeah, basically.
Oh.
It's nothing. It's a blank canvas. And they realize that not only are they the ones that are supposed to be doing this and creating this world, but they're also now attached to it since they came down.
Attached to it in the sense that like they are like emotionally attached to it?
No, in the sense that they do not get to leave it until the end. They're...
Is that like a trick, or did they know that was going to happen?
No, they knew. I think...
Like, what's his name was like, ha, now you're stuck!
Yeah. No, they knew. I think a lot of this is under that same idea that I kind of talked to you about with the Istari, with like the wizards who came over. How I feel like a lot of times... I talked to Carlos about this a little bit. It's not mentioned, but like a lot of the things that are discussed between like Iluvatar and the Ainur, and then like let's say the Valar and the Maya, there are...
Iluvatar is like God,
Right.
Manwë is like Jesus.
Right. It's all like without time. Like that's why they were confused when they got down, right? Because they saw Earth. And they saw it the way that it, like, will be or is and all of this stuff. But they saw it, like, out of time.
Okay.
And so they get down and they realize that it's not there. I think it's the same thing with everything about their song. That there are oftentimes in the book where they, like, they come to remembrance of something. If that makes sense.
Here's my question. So when they did their, like, songy thingy and they made the Earth.
Right.
Why isn't it that their songs didn't make all the things that they were elements for already? Like, not necessarily making it a perfect thing, but, like, here's a mountain and a river, and you can make it prettier with some grass later.
Right, they did.
So it does have mountains.
They did, but only in vision. So the songs were the plan. The songs were the thing, like, we built the songs were the plan. Here is what you sang, here is your songs, here is the plan. Now go do it.
So they wrote a book.
Kind of. Yeah.
Okay.
Alright. So they're down, and they realize it is now their job, because they are a part of the earth. They are with it until the end. It's their job to start building things and beautifying and make things good, especially for the children of Ilúvatar, and they do not know when they are going to come about. So let's get to work type of thing.
Okay.
Right? And basically through this whole time, through this first part, it's kind of fun because it talks about, it kind of glances over the initial part of it, but it's basically, they raise up a mountain, Melkor kicks it down. They make a valley, Melkor raises up a mountain. They try to do one thing, Melkor says, fuck you.
Why don't they literally just start using reverse psychology on it?
Well, so the whole thing is, like, Manwë just thinks that eventually he's gonna, like, come to his senses. But, anyway.
But, like, if I was one of the other people, I'd be like, okay, he did the opposite of what I wanted, so I'm gonna make a river here, knowing he's gonna put a mountain here.
So what happens is this is happening, right? They're trying to do one thing, Melkor comes at it the other way. They try to do one thing, Melkor comes at it the other way. So finally, Tulkas was one of the Valar that didn't come down at first. He was gonna just chill up in heaven.
Isn't he the one that goes and defeats Melkor really quick, too?
Yeah, so he was, like, chilling up in heaven. He's like, I'm not gonna go down there. This is where I'm gonna be. And Manwë is basically just like, I can't handle this guy. Like, my brother's really pissing me off, and he's wrecking everything that we're doing. So Tulkas is finally like, all right, let's do this shit. And he comes down, and, like, the description of him coming down is really fun, because basically, like, every time he goes to war, he laughs. Like, he's never angry. He's like, yeah, it's time to fuck shit up. Like, he's excited for it.
He's Michael Fassbender in 300.
Yeah, yeah. So he comes down, and immediately Melkor bounces. Like, not even just leaves to a different side of the world. He actually goes out into, like, the outer darkness. He goes out into space. Okay. He leaves right away. So during that time, and this is where two different stories diverge, right? Because in the Book of Lost Tales, they say one thing, and in the Silmarillion, which is actual canon, right, they say something else. So what happens is Yavanna goes to Aule, her husband, and she's like...
I've already forgotten. I thought Manwë was the big guy.
He is.
Who's Aule?
Aule's the smith.
Oh, okay. God, the names are confusing.
So Yavanna goes to Aule, and she says, in my song, I sang all these things about beautiful trees and flowers and animals and all this stuff, and there's no light. So none of those things can grow. Mm-hmm. So I need you to do something for me. And she asks him to build 2 towers. One in the north of the disk of Earth, and one in the south. And they're tall enough, right? They're massive towers, mm-hmm. that at the top, they put... they basically akin it to fire, but it's light.
Okay.
And there's one in the north, one in the south, and they're tall enough that they are lighting the entirety of Earth.
Okay.
So not just Middle Earth, not just like one side or the other, it's the entirety of Earth. Also, at this point, from the way that it's described, Earth is basically Pangea right now. So like it's
giant...
one big continent.
I see.
And they've got their towers on either side, and they've made their home on an island in a giant lake.
In a giant lake?
Yeah, so like giant lake, island.
Oh, I see.
And that's where they've made their home. And during this time, it's the time where Melkor is gone. They consider this the spring of Arda. So Arda is Earth, right? So it's the spring of Arda. This is when everything goes bananas. You've got tons of things growing, trees, flowers, animals are coming to be, like all of this stuff, right? It's beautiful and it's amazing and everything's becoming exactly what it's supposed to be. But because of those lights are end up being a detriment to the rest of the Valar because they don't notice, because everything is so bright in every direction, they don't notice when Melkor comes back. Because his darkness doesn't, like, because of how bright the towers are, his darkness doesn't, like, fill the land like it normally does, because these towers are super bright. So he comes back, they don't notice that darkness. So he's back, right? And then, just like always, because this is how it always happens, and, like, you get to close to the end of, like, the Valar talking about, or the Valar being in the story in the Silmarillion, and you're like, Manwë, you should know by now that you should stop celebrating things. Because what happens is Manwë calls for a celebration, right? It's the spring of Arda, and things are wonderful, and they're beautiful, and they're fantastic. So he's like, let's celebrate. And they all get together, and they go...
He hasn't celebrated anything up to this point, I thought.
He hasn't. But this becomes a problem. Him calling for celebrations is always when shit gets fucked up.
This is the initial one.
Yes.
You couldn't know better.
So he calls for this celebration, right? And they all get together, and they're doing their thing, and Melkor, of course, takes this time to say, fuck you guys! And he breaks the towers. So he collapses the towers, and in doing so, changes the way that it's described, changes Arda forever. It can never be made again the way that it was. Okay. And so the towers coming down, because they were so big, made valleys and canyons and mountains and all of that stuff, right? Just by crashing down and breaking the land. Not only that, but all the fire that was in there scorched tons of stuff. Water came up where it wasn't supposed to be. Fire went where it wasn't supposed to be. All of that stuff, right? So a lot of what Yavanna made got burned. Not all of it, but a lot of it. And at that point, that's where we have the breaking of continents, right? So everything changed. You had this break of land because of these towers falling. Now that's in the story of the Silmarillion. In the story in the Book of Lost Tales, it's actually Melkor and Aule, and this it still follows that same path, but Melkor and Aule build the towers together. But Melkor tricks Aule and has him build them out of ice. We talked about this a little bit.
Yes.
So he builds them out of ice, they put fire in it, and the ice melts. But Aule's dumb and doesn't realize that. So the ice ends up melting, and that's where you get, like, vast oceans. And again, that's where kind of that breaking of the continents happens, right? Because the water of the ice melts and fills the land.
But the two stories sound different, like breaking the towers versus like having them melt of their own accord.
Right. Still Melkor's fault because he tricked Aule into doing it.
Yeah, but like what is the coincidence of it happening specifically on the day of celebration of Spring Arda?
Right. So the other one's better, right? Breaking the towers, a little more dramatic, all that fun stuff.
Makes more sense.
Yeah. So that happens. And towers fall, and Melkor's like, suckers, there's no light again. I'm back to being awesome because it's darkness. And he bounces. because again, Tulkas is pissed, right? Tulkas is just always mad at Melkor. He just always wants to fuck him up.
Stuck down on Earth now?
Tulkas?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a part of it.
I've been
Oh,
no.
Right, so that's actually another part. Oh, I missed that part. I really wanted to go over that part too. It's alright, we're gonna go back. So during that celebration, this is another reason why like Tulkas is now a part of the earth, is during that celebration, Tulkas actually gets married. He marries Orame's sister.
Who's Orome?
Orome is the hunter.
The one that carries the moon?
The what?
The one that carries the moon?
No. He's that's Tilion. Tilion was of Orame's like hunting party.
I see.
Orame's the guy who ends up finding the elves, and they think it's Melkor.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So
I should like draw and Procreate while you're talking, and you can just have it in the clip on the side because it will show it in like time.
oh yeah. So Tulkas gets married to Nenya. No, that's the name of the ring.
Nenya business.
I know, right? That's the name of the ring that Galadriel has. Nenya.
That suits her Nenya business.
Yeah. Anyway, he gets married to Orome's sister, who I cannot remember, and so it'll be here. And Aule is basically exhausted, right? Because he's been doing a ton of work. He's been building towers, he's been bringing up mountains, he's been crafting gems and metals and all of this stuff.
I like to think of all of them creating these things like they're vendors.
Yeah. So Aule and Tulkas are both like, we are exhausted. Tulkas has been...
Do they ever describe where the matter comes from?
No. Tulkas has been fucking shit up because Melkor left a bunch of his baddies on the world, right? Aule has been trying to do as much as he can to bring light to the world and everything. And so during this celebration, because Tulkas also gets married, they are like in this rest period. Like those two specifically. And that's why Melkor is able to come back and do what he does. Because Aule and Tulkas, the two people who are both most like him and most able to defeat him, are just wiped. So Melkor is able to come back, destroy the towers, right? Everything comes down, breaks, oceans, fires.
So was their home island destroyed?
Yeah, home island's destroyed. Okay, so everything is broken. Nothing can ever be made the same.
Got it.
But now you've got kind of continents, right? So at this point, what happens is they say, this is never going to happen again. And they build their land of Valinor. So now they have Middle-earth on one side. And they've got their land of Valinor on the other. And there's a great ocean in between them, right? But they raise these giant cliffs, like as a guard on their island. And this is where they create Taniquetil, which is the tallest peak in Arda, and it's where Manwë's throne is. And so this is where they kind of create their places, right? So you have Taniquetil, which is for Manwë. You've got the Halls of Mandos. You have Lorien, which is the garden. All of this stuff is now in Valinor. And it's something that they built because everything else got wrecked. And essentially, they abandoned the rest of the world. Because, I mean, basically they got fed up. Mm-hmm. Right? They didn't want to deal with it anymore. So they got fed up and abandoned the rest of the world. Where were we? They built
They
Valinor.
abandoned the rest of the world. Look, I can look at my notes for reference.
They abandoned the rest of the world, which made it so that Melkor could create Autumno. Dun dun dun.
Could create what?
Autumno.
Autumno?
Yeah.
That sounds like my toe and my tongue made something.
Autumno. Bum bum bum.
It does sound stinky.
Yeah. So Autumno is his lair, essentially. It's where he lives. It's underground pillars and darkness and evil things. And there is where Belrogs became Belrogs and Balrogs, I think is how it's technically pronounced. Doesn't matter. And dragons became dragons, and where elves were turned into orcs and all of that fun stuff, right? Autumno. It's the scary place.
What's his name makes like the new breed of things? What are those?
Urkai.
The ones that look more like humans.
Urkai. So they're a mix between humans and orcs.
Yeah. Have we told that story yet?
Nah.
Okay.
About dirty old man Sauron mating orcs and humans.
Would you consider that a history or a character reference?
That could be both. We'll get there.
Okay. Continue.
Alright, where were we? Oh, Autumno. Goblins are interesting though. The only reason why I say that, and like if we're going off on that, is it's never really... They're two very distinct words in Tolkien, goblins and orcs. But on occasion, it seems like he almost uses them interchangeably. So like, in The Hobbit, Gandalf, and this is in the book and the movie, but Gandalf specifically tells Bilbo that his sword will glow blue when goblins are around. But it also works for orcs. Because it's never exactly described the difference between the two, ever. So they're used differently, but also almost interchangeably. It's really weird.
That's annoying.
So I like to think of it like some people say that they're the same thing. I like to think of it more like the movies, where goblins are different from orcs.
Okay.
That's how I see it. I think goblins were maybe, because orcs were like, elves that were changed. Because that's one of the things that you run into, though. Melkor, so let's talk about Melkor being in Autumno, right? Melkor cannot create.
What's an Autumno?
That's his little layer that he just built.
Oh, yeah.
Right? If we're going back into the history, Autumno is the little layer that he just built. Melkor can't create, though. Melkor can only manipulate and change.
Okay.
So he makes mock creations, right?
He's just really insecure about his powers. That's what all this is
Yeah.
about.
Yeah. But
He needs therapy.
what happens is, because of that, you have to think, okay, then what did he make goblins out of? And so in my mind, I think maybe there were already some, hobbits around. Because goblins are a little bit smaller and stuff in stature. Or maybe he took dwarves after dwarves were made and turned them into goblins. But goblins can't just exist, right? They would have had to have been manipulated and changed from something else.
Yeah.
Which is a side thing. But it works here. Now, during this time where he's building Autumno, right? And you gotta think about Melkor's powers, too. Like, he's a very powerful being, and he's a lot like Aule in building. So he's able to build this structure underground, and it is like a fortress. People can't get in there. Even the Valar can't get in there, right? This place is, it's very well built. He's almost just as good a smith as Aule is. So he knows how to build his shit.
Did he learn from Aule?
No. He knew beforehand. He had... I think we talked about this last time when we were talking about the Ainulindale. There we go. That Melkor had the most of the mind of Iluvatar, right? So he knew the most of all the different things.
I see.
So that's why he can manipulate life. That's why he is a good builder. That's why he can, he can do all of these different things because he knew the most of all of the small pieces of Iluvatar's mind. He's building Autumno. He's building it up and creating his forces. Now, during this time is when they had finished Valinor and basically given up on everything else. Orome and Yavanna, Orome specifically, would go over and do his hunts in Middle-earth, right? Yavanna would go over and kind of check on things. See how things are going in her land that she created and beautified and then all went to shit, right? So she would go over and check on things, but you've got to remember, we're back to no light. All we have is starlight at this point. Aule, however, is kind of stuck doing nothing, right? He built the halls in Mandos, and he built some things of his own, but other than that, he's just kind of stuck. So, what does he do? He builds himself some friends. Something that he wasn't supposed to do. So he takes clay, and he makes the first of the 7 lords of dwarves.
I wonder if any of this... Has anybody written any kind of, book about the psychology of Tolkien?
I don't know. I mean, I have a Psychology of the Hobbit book.
I think a psychology of Tolkien could be written, just the different parts of psychology that you can see in different characters, and if maybe you're related to Tolkien's life.
Yeah.
Yeah. You did your job and now you're sad and lonely, so you're gonna make yourself some good friends.
Right. I mean, that's kind of what he did. He was just he just wanted to build something. He wanted friends to teach. That's the other thing with Aule is he's a teacher. Right? He wants to teach people how to smith. He wants to teach people, and that's always been his downfall. Mm-hmm. Is that, as you'll see in the episode that Carlos and I did, mm-hmm. he's really bad at choosing his students. He just chooses the wrong people all the time. Mm-hmm. But it's because he wants friends, and he wants to teach. So the very first mistake that he makes is he makes somebody to teach. So he makes the dwarves, right? He creates the dwarves, he turns them into the thing, and then it's like the Bill Cosby skit of Noah. Mm-hmm. Iluvatar comes down and he's like, Aule, what'd you do? Yeah. And Aule's just like, oh shit, I got caught. And Aule's justifying it, right? Saying I mean, basically he was impatient. Saying I was impatient, I wanted somebody to teach, I wanted somebody to talk to, I honestly don't have a whole lot to do right now.
The other Iluvatar will talk to me.
And he's like, I didn't do this out of malice, this wasn't me trying to take creation power away from you. The way that he says it in the book is how can you be mad at a child pretending to be like their father, right? It wasn't done out of malice. It was me just making friends.
What an eloquent defense, for lack of a better term.
And he says
he's a good defense attorney for himself.
And he realizes that what he did was wrong. So he basically, and again, I always picture this as Iluvatar's not there, he's just talking to him, right? Because Iluvatar's never on Earth, he's always in the ether, mm-hmm. just like God. And so he's there, and he's talking to him, and basically, Aule realizes, I did a bad thing, I feel really bad about it, I'm gonna pick up my hammer now, and smash my toys. Mm-hmm. And as he does it, the dwarf lords that he's created all in the book again, it says that they quell back, right? So they're
it's just a really bizarre concept to me. Are they just tiny little the size comparison would be a toy?
Yeah, a Lego. He just built little Lego guys. And he's like, I'm sorry, I know I wasn't supposed to build these Lego guys, and he goes to pick up a hammer and smash them. Uh-huh. Right? And they like shirk back, and Iluvatar stops him, and he's like, "Hold up! Like, can't you see that they have lives?" Because the whole thing is they were actually only able to do anything while Aule was like putting it in their mind to do something. So they weren't autonomous, if that makes sense.
Okay.
When he first built them, made the dwarves, they weren't autonomous. He would have to make them think, like, move, and they would move. But Iluvatar says, like, as you were doing this and as you were creating them, I made them autonomous. This was all part of my plan, as Iluvatar does, right? He's like, this was all a part of it, right? I made them autonomous. They have lives now. Don't kill them. That would be bad. However, I'm not going to allow them to be the first. You're not going to take that away from my creations. So, sleep. And they sleep. And they're asleep, honestly, until we don't know when. We have no idea when they wake up. It's sometime after the elves and before men.
Okay, but here's the question that came to my mind. If the dwarves are that tiny, then that means the elves are not much bigger either, which confuses me as to why they would go and live on an island with a giant being that could literally smash them.
Why?
It's like the world would seem incredibly big to all of these tiny things and incredibly small to every being that was 1,000 times bigger than them.
Yeah. I mean, well, so it's talked about that the...
Like, I'm now imagining Melkor going and grabbing elves and just, like, pinching them and, like, putting them in his...
Right, but the Valar are also able to manipulate their own size and form. Right? So maybe in Valinor they're only 20 feet tall, not 50.
Okay.
So it like their physical form can be manipulated by themselves, however they see fit.
Mm-hmm.
But that was one of the issues with them like fighting Melkor. Is one of the reasons why they didn't want to do that is because they know that like a battle of Valar can completely fuck up the earth. Like, that's a bad thing for everyone. Mm-hmm. And at that time, they didn't know when or where the elves were, right? And we'll get to that point later on. But this happens, dwarves happen, right? Aule, and this is one of my favorite stories, just because Aule's so, like, about it. And I'm like, you're kind of being an asshole to your wife, dude. But Aule comes back, and he goes to Yavanna. And he's like, so, I got in trouble. Iluvatar got mad at me, because I made dwarves. And she's like, you made dwarves? He's like, yeah, I made dwarves. And, like, he tells her about them. And she's basically like, why didn't you tell me? Like, you should have, like, at least... like, talk to me about this. And
said every woman ever.
And he's like, honestly, part of me knew that what I was doing was wrong, and so I just felt bad. Like, I didn't want to bring anybody else into it. And she essentially is like, yeah, but because you didn't come to me, your dwarves, like, your creation is going to have no love for my creation because I didn't get to be a part of it. I wasn't a part of what you did. And he's like, yeah, you're right. Like, they're going to fuck your shit up. Like, they're going to eat meat from animals, and they are going to use trees as fire to make things. Like, they're going to fuck your shit up. And she was just like, this is ridiculous. Like, you're just, like, this is just okay by you? He's like, I mean, yeah. She's like, alright, this is stupid. And she goes to Manwë. Oh, no, that was the thing. Is then she was like, well, this is, like, I can't believe that you're okay with your creations doing this. And he's like, well, it's not just going to be my creations. She's like, what do you mean? He's like, elves and men are going to do it too. Like, the children of Iluvatar are going to cut down trees for their houses and fire. and they're gonna hunt animals. She was like, what? He's like, yeah. So she goes to Manwe, and she's like, are none of my creations sacred? Like, is just everything that I make for the benefit of the children of Iluvatar? Manwe's like, yeah. And she's like, this is ridiculous. Like, why am I even doing this then? And Manwe's like, all right, hold up. Let me talk to Iluvatar and see if there's something we can do about this.
What a broken work system.
And, like, he comes back and he's like, I definitely feel like there's something that we can do about it. And like I said, remember how I said, like, the songs are out of time, kind of? So this is part of that, where Yavanna's like, do you not remember my song? And she's like, I was remembering what I sang and the parts that I sang. And then Manwe starts to remember it a little bit. And she's like, I created the shepherds of the trees. So basically guardians of the forest. Ents. Right? And Manwe was like, that's right, that was in the song. So you're gonna have that. Like, you've got Ents. You've got guardians of the trees. And she actually comes back kind of like, okay, I've got that. Like, awesome. I've got Guardians of the Forest. And she comes back to Aule, and she's like, so I talked to Manwe, and I've got Guardians of the Forest now. And, your creations are going to have to deal with that. And Aule's just like, all right. I'm still going to need firewood. Like,
he's like, well, use your Guardians now.
Yeah, it's like, okay, that's cool, but they're still gonna cut down trees. Like, sorry, but that's just how it is. And, like, she's frustrated by it, but, like, whatever. But it's just one of my favorite stories, because it's just this couple that, honestly, like, in my head, I'm like, how did you two get married in the first place? Mm-hmm. Like, a smith and then, like, a lover of nature. But then also, just this whole idea of, like, I figured a way around your dwarves fucking up all my shit, and he's just like, nah, they're still gonna fuck up your shit.
But I think that was kind of a, unintentional, maybe, not quite sure, sexist point on, Tolkien's hand.
Yeah.
Yeah, that it doesn't really matter what a woman did, the man's creation still does whatever it wants.
Yeah. Well, I think part of it, too...
Patriarchy!
I think part of it, too, was, like, showing that, like, for the most part, like, plants and animals are here for the higher beings. Right?
Which is entirely frustrating that he gave that position to a female.
Right.
But what else are you gonna do? It's the 1950s.
Well, not only that, but, like, if you look at the entirety of the pantheon of all other gods, that's how it always is. Right?
He could have chosen to be different.
It's true. And it was the 1930s.
Whatever. Even worse. But also, I can't even remember any other female gods because they're almost never mentioned or have yet to be mentioned.
That I've mentioned?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the only other ones that I've really talked about are Varda. She's Manwe's wife. She is the goddess of, like, the stars. But she's one of the only... She was the one that set the path for the sun and the moon. Mm-hmm. But she's one of the only ones that I've mentioned so far. Now, she...
Are there more? Or
yeah.
is it mostly just males?
No, there's 7 and 7.
Okay.
Well, there's 7 and 6. Yeah, 7 and 6. Because Ulmal doesn't have a wife, because the ocean is his partner.
Most of that doesn't make sense to me, so...
But yeah. There are others. The problem is like, I do not remember most of the names of any of them. So I'd have to go through and, like, we should have one where I can actually list through all the names.
They just don't seem... They don't seem terribly important to the story.
Yeah, I mean, like, Yavanna is definitely the one that you see the most of. And it's because of her... I mean, what she creates pushes forward the story. So, like, Aule and Yavanna push forward this story more than any other of the beings, even more than like Melkor and Manwë and all of them. Aule and Yavanna, their creations and what they do push this story forward the most. So I think that's why you hear about them more than anybody else. Like I said, Varda is there, but Varda is only really there in the first initial part. Like, she created the light for the lamps. But, like, she doesn't come into play that often, except for the fact that she is mentioned as a person that is always trying to, like, help Manwë in his decisions.
She doesn't do a very good job.
Well, could you imagine if he didn't have her?
Well, you haven't mentioned a time in which she does help him, so yes?
So this happens, right? She has this discussion with Aule and with Manwë, Yavanna does. And then she's like, okay, stuff needs to start growing again. I'm sick of there not being light here. This is ridiculous. I know that we've kind of abandoned Middle-earth, so in Valinor we need something. So she goes to Lorien, the garden part, and she begins to sing. A lot of song happens in these books. So she starts to sing, and all the
I'm pretty sure Disney taught us that singing will make anything happen.
Right? And all the other gods come because they're like, ooh, Yavanna's singing. And they come, and they come to Lorien, and they're all there. I think even Olmo's there, which is usually it's unusual, because Olmo is like Poseidon. He's the one that likes to just stay in water. Okay. He almost never comes onto land. And so
is he more like Aquaman status as opposed to like Triton status?
What do you mean?
Like has legs.
Yeah, he's not basically a merman.
I mean, if I had the power to choose, I would choose to be a merman in the water, personally. Or mermaid. Yeah. I know words.
But he almost never comes on land, just because he's like, meh, I like my water. But Yavanna's singing. And she's putting all of her power into her singing, right? She's singing with, like, with gusto. And she sings and she sings and she sings, and it kind of seems like she's doing this for days. Just singing. And everybody's around, like,
everybody's waiting for days.
Just awe-inspired by this song. And then, suddenly, pew, out of the ground, this little shoot happens, right? And it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And it is Telperion, the silver tree, the one that we've talked about. And its light is silver, and it's beautiful, and everybody is like, oh my goodness, this is so great, we have a tree, this is fantastic. And she continues to sing, and then, pew, here comes another shoot. And it's the golden tree that I now forget the name of, damn it. Telperion and... why do I always forget the golden tree's name? Guess it doesn't matter. But the golden tree comes up. Bloop, 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 bloom. And now you've got the two trees. Okay? And the light of the two trees wanes and waxes, and there is a time where Telperion is at its full brightness, right? And then... oh, I thought I had it. The gold tree is at its full brightness, right? And they're never not bright. So there's always, or they're never not lit.
One is always shining.
Right. Well, and kind of they both always are, but like one is brighter than the other, and then it comes down, and like, you know, it's that
they're
game.
Never not alive.
Yeah. So they're both always sending off light, one more than the other at any given point. And it's a 7-hour cycle. But on the 7th hour, they mingle. So 7 hours of, or like 6 hours of brightness of Telperion, 1 hour of kind of them together, and then 6 hours of brightness of Lorien. Lorelin. Lorien is the garden, Lorelin is the tree. Lorelin. And things start to grow in Valinor. And
why did he choose that time schedule? It'd have to change.
it does. I mean, it changes eventually, but you're looking at essentially 12 hours, right?
That's half a day.
Yeah, it's a 12-hour day for them.
But I'm saying, why did you choose that to start with? Why didn't you choose a 24-hour schedule to explain why the world is how it is?
Because that doesn't happen until the sun and the moon anyway. Remember? So it doesn't matter. So you've got these trees in Valinor now. And nothing in Middle-earth. Middle-earth is still in darkness. Because of those giant cliffs that I told you that they built on the island.
I drew them.
Yeah, giant cliffs. None of that light gets over to Middle-earth. So the light of the trees, boom. Only in Valinor. You don't get to see it anywhere else. Middle-earth's still in darkness. Melkor's still in Autumno doing dark and dirty things. Okay? And that, we're ending it at the two trees. So the reason why I said that, like, Yavanna and Aule are the most important is because Yavanna creates the two trees. And the two trees is literally what pushes the rest of this story. Right? Because without the two trees, we don't have the Silmarils. Without the Silmarils, we don't have literally anything else that happens. Mm-hmm. And with Aule, Carlos and I talk about this a little bit. Aule teaches all of the people that do all the bad things moving forward. So, like, Aule and Yavanna push this story more than anyone else. So we now have those two trees. We now have light in Valinor and growing things and beauty and loveliness. And it's an age where the gods basically have forgotten Middle-earth and are just enjoying their time in Valinor like a bunch of assholes.
Here's your roadmap to today's discussion in Tolkien Land.
Roadmap to today's discussion in Tolkien Land. I'm going to bring it right. Yep, we can see that. The light's a little off. Yeah. Any questions?
I ask my questions as the story's going.
It's true. I just didn't know if you had anything left at the end.
No.
Alright. That's it. I'm out.